on several different election bills. And I think what we're going to do is take a look at the Senate Bill 221 for write-in candidates and the difference in the House and Senate position, and have Jason give us a quick overview on that. Maybe on page, I think, does everybody have this? Page 2 of that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, both the Senate bill and the House version would create new affidavit of write-in candidacy requirements for state legislative offices, state board of education, member positions, county elected offices, and elected offices for cities of the first class. The primary difference is on when those affidavits must be filed. The Senate bill had those affidavits for the legislative offices, and the county and city offices must be filed between 21 and 30 days prior to the election. The Senate modified that and set it at the fourth Monday preceding the election, at which the write-in candidate seeks nomination or election. It also amended to be the fourth Monday for the other affidavits, which are for the office of governor, lieutenant governor, offices of president and vice president, and any of the offices for state offices that are elected on a statewide basis. So all of the affidavits would have to be submitted by the fourth Monday preceding the election under the House version.
So you just conformed it all to the same for all the write-in stuff?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Any thoughts on that, committee or Senate committee? I think that's seems pretty good. It's all conformed. We don't have to have any differences between that. I'm pretty good with, I think with any other, that's the only differences, right? On those dates. Yeah, I think we're pretty good with that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think our thought was to put, to move on with the 221 and then to also add the language of 2086. And that's where there's a whole lot of stuff to go over. So I don't know whether whether you guys need to go through line by line. It depends on what you want to do or what you want to discuss.
I defer to the members of the House here, but I think that we're pretty comfortable with the Senate's version of 2086. You know, we got some other things we probably need to run through on it, but I think that that's a good starting point, unless anybody's got any objections.
I think we're good with that.
Okay.
So you want to start at the top of the new section 1?
Yeah, sure.
I think Secretary of State offered some language that we think is pretty good. It would just change that, the striking out completely to read, the Secretary of State shall assist and advise county election officers in conducting elections. So it would still strike out the oversee, the conduct in that area. And I think, Jay, do you have a balloon? Jason's got the balloon for that. And if there's any questions, please speak up.
I think this reflects, you know, kind of some of the conferees that came to your committee to talk about their concerns with the bill. I think it reflects that, plus the language that the Secretary of State's trying to get at with what they initially intended with it. So I'm fine with it.
Okay. All righty. So, you good?
Yes.
You good? Okay. Any questions?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So when you made that statement there, representative of what the Secretary of State was trying to get at, now I want to know what he was trying to get at, if Clay or you can share.
Oh, yeah. Basically, what he did is, you know, there was some original concern about the language, so he just wanted to make the, And I think there was some, Clay, if you could speak up to this, I think it would help clarify it with regard to the change in the language.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, there was some concern from witnesses that this was an attempt to expand the Secretary of State's power, when in fact it was to make clear in one location the Secretary of State's role is to assist and advise counties, and then B is counties run elections. And I think some of the language in 1A was a little problematic, and you've taken that out. So.
Just cleaned it up. Yeah. So if you guys are good with that? Okay, thank you. So we'll make that change. And then we'll move on to, I think we have an amendment. I'm not sure if you want to have a specific order that would work better for you, Jason, or I think we could go to maybe the independent candidate verification amendment first. There you go. And Jason, you can explain. I think
maybe you handed out the wrong one there.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mine just is the striking of section 1 without any.
The amendment appears on the backside, page 13. Did not copy.
Didn't copy.
Copying. My apologies.
I think that was what it was. Was that in 221? Or no, pardon me. I'm looking at 2086.
I could just explain it. On
Yeah.
page 13 of the bill, I'll get you this section.
Page 13, you said?
Page
yes?
13, this is section 18 of the bill, and this is new language directing that not later than the meeting of the State Board of Canvassers, the Secretary of State shall determine the validity of the independent nominating petitions, and these are independent candidates who submit a nominating petition. The amendment that would be proposed on that page 13 would require that within 20 days after receipt of an independent nominating petition, but not later than the date of the meeting of the State Board of Canvassers, the Secretary would determine the validity of the nominating petition. So it would put a time limit there of having to do that determination within 20 days after receiving it, but then set an end date at the meeting of the State Board of Canvassers.
It didn't seem fair to us that, say, somebody filed in January, and they had to wait all the way until the State Board canvassers met to get that verified, so that it gave them a time frame to get the verification, which seemed fair to us.
When do the State Board of Canvassers normally meet?
The State Board of Canvassers, I think that would be, Brian, if you'd like to, Brian Caskey, come up.
The meeting of the State Board of Canvassers after the primary election is no later than September 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, so it seemed like that's 9 months is a long time to wait if you decided to jump on the petition early.
Those canvassers are statewide? Statewide, the canvassers statewide?
So we are talking about the meeting of the State Board of Canvassers that certify the results of the national and state elections. So it'd be the governor, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General.
I'm just point of clarification. So it's saying within 20 days. So if somebody turns their nominating petitions in, their signature list in March, the canvassers have 20 days to verify it? Is that the import of this?
Brian, or
That is what the language says. The way I heard it is that no matter when it's turned in, even if it's on the last day, that we have 20 days to make a determination on the validity of the petition.
okay.
I think we're all on board with it.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. I think the next one up then would be the ballot rotation. Let's go to that. That would be page 10, line 13. There you go. And Jason, if you'd like to explain that.
Mr. Chairman, this balloon would strike section 16 starting on page 9 of the bill and section 24 starting on page 20 of the bill. Both of those sections dealt with the rotation of names on the ballot and would, if, let me get to the language here. Make sure I get this correct on the language. In the case of certain candidates, if the Secretary of State finds that the state cannot get a fair proportion of party members to give each candidate in any given district an equitable or fair opportunity to have the candidate's name first on the ballot in the respective counties of the district, then the Secretary of State shall order the county election officers to rotate the names of the candidates for such district offices according to precinct. The bill had allowed the Secretary to designate certain counties in the district at the Secretary's discretion. The amendment simply strikes those sections, so it leaves it at current law that the Secretary of State would order the county election officers in the various counties of the district to rotate the ballot names.
I think the local, it again restores the local control over the listing of the ballots. Or listing of the names on the ballot, I mean.
So just confirmation, this is just going back to what current law is? Is that what you're saying? This is what current law?
That is correct. Just restoring current law. Do you have any other questions, Paul, for the Secretary's office or?
No, yeah, it makes pretty good sense to me. I think it alleviates some of the concerns that we heard.
Good on that? Okay. I think we'll add that in. Then, next up, let's talk about the ballot images. That would be number 3. Strike.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll just describe this one.
Okay.
It's very easy to describe. On page 40 of the bill, under section 48, the bill would amend 25-3009 regarding audits of the paper ballots. And on the bottom of page 40, line 43, the bill would have added the language, the audit shall be performed manually and shall review all paper ballots or the corresponding ballot images would be added. The amendment, I believe you're proposing, would strike that new language in line 43, so that it would keep it at current law.
So they have to manually use the paper ballots for an audit.
Yes, or yeah, it would basically be the same practice that the counties use currently for audits.
Any issues with that? Good.
Yeah, I think it addresses a big concern.
Big concern from a lot of folks, yeah, yeah. All right, I think we'll move on then. The next was the population with regard to the 100,000, the amendment that we made. And I know you had some concerns about that with, particularly with Leavenworth County, I think.
I think we are really fond of our clerk, and we're not looking to go to a commissioner anytime soon. And so I'd ask that we change that to 110,000. We're 85 something right now to give us a little more breathing room before we have to readdress it.
And I think that would also impact, I know Douglas County had some concerns because they're right below that threshold as well. Douglas County was at not quite 100,000, were they? Do you know, Brian, or they're very close? I think Douglas County is the only one that would potentially be impacted, but by using it, moving to 110,000, I think it would take them out, give them a little time, a little bit of breathing room, certainly would for Leavenworth County too. And I think we decided we're, Go ahead, Brian.
Correct. So the official U.S. Census population for Douglas County is 119,000 currently.
So it would kick in for Douglas, but not Leavenworth. It'd give Leavenworth a little
Douglas County would be the only county impacted currently.
impacted. What would be the timeline for them to comply?
It would depend on the wording of what you decide. If it's effective upon publication in the statute book, then we would start working with the Douglas County government to ensure that there would be an election commissioner office effective July 1 of 23.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Any questions? Good with that? 119. Yeah, but Leavenworth's only, what, 85-ish? Okay. So I think everybody's good with that? Okay. Then the next item up for bid is the removal from the voter rolls from 2 to 4 years. And again, that's a position, the Senate established, took it down to 2 years. Yeah. Our thoughts are that, you know, if we want to be able to clean up the voter rolls faster, which is one of the big concerns, then shortening that time frame is of fair importance to us. And I know the House had the 4 years.
So the revisers can correct me if I'm wrong, but this measure is actually about removing people from the permanent advanced voter list, not from voter rolls. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so I know that the county clerks were really concerned about, you know, they have to send these things out for 4 elections before they can stop. And so I acknowledge the cost savings we would get, but, you know, we got some pretty strong resistance in committee to go into 2 years from a lot of other groups that represent people that are on this advanced voter list. And the intent, I know it's hard to believe based on how contentious the hearings got, but the intent was always that this was a kind of a non-confrontational cleanup of election law. And so, you know, I like our position at 4 years. If it were voter rolls, I might be more inclined
yeah.
to be on your side of it, but with the advanced voter list, I think maybe 4 years might be a little easier to get everybody on board with.
Well, I would shortening to the 3 years would be a good compromise, do you think? Or I guess I need to know what the process, if that would alleviate some of the concerns of those at the, you know, who want the longer time frame. Sure.
So Mr. Chair, thank you. So I'm assuming the Secretary of State's office might come to the podium and give some clarification. But from my understanding, permanent, those who are on a permanent ballot to receive their advance ballot, most of them are senior citizens, people with disabilities, who they have to submit a statement from a doctor to say that they are disabled, and then they submit that information to the county clerk's office, Mr. Chairman. And so then if we remove them, maybe they go to a nursing home for a little bit, or they're in the hospital and they, you know, just didn't vote, and then they get out and they want to do that, and then they've got to do that whole process over again. I mean,
maybe we have just any thoughts from Clay or Brian on that with regard to the time frame issue. Just don't want to do anything that's a problem, but.
Mr. Chairman, I think ultimately it's a policy decision by the legislature. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We just want clarity on how long a county election officer has to wait before they send a notice to someone who's on the permanent advance list who has not voted. So I think the office just wants clear direction on 2 years versus 3 years versus 4 years.
If you'd like to speak to
Clay
that.
may,
I guess my question would be, you know, you have people who do pass away, and we want to be able to take them off the list, and 4 years seems like a long time to me, especially with someone who's elderly, disabled, things of that nature.
Senator, I think the original reason that it was 4 years, because that includes a presidential election, and about a third of the voters only vote in a presidential, and that would make sure this person is inactive. And we did get, like Representative Proctor said, a lot of pushback from the disabled community on this, because people on this list are disabled.
Any thoughts? On that? Okay. I think we could go with the 4 years on that.
Thank you, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I think, I believe that's all we've got on 2086, unless there was something else.
On 2086, I think that's it, but I think we also had something we wanted to fix on the underlying Bill 221. I think when we drafted this, we accidentally left out Congress races.
Oh, that's right.
Congressional races. and
That's
so
correct.
Everybody has a write-in requirement except congressional candidates now.
And we want to be able to fix that, so I think we do have a balloon on that. I skipped over that in my notes somehow. Thank you for catching that. Oh, here you go, Rick. There you go. Thank you. Okay, Jason, if you'd like to explain that.
Mr. Chairman, real briefly, you'll see on page 1, there's a box there to add an affidavit of writing candidacy requirement for offices of United States Senator, United States House of Representatives. You'll also note the submission date is the same as in the remainder of the bill, the fourth Monday preceding the election. And then the other amendments on page 3, just to add to the rules for the canvassers for counting so that to count a write-in vote for a candidate for those offices, the candidate must have filed an affidavit of candidacy.
That seems to make sense to me. Any questions? Good with that? Okay. I think we're all good with it. I think we're good with 2086. So I guess the intent is to put 2086, add it to the contents of 221.
With the amendments that we.
With the amendments that we made, yes.
Everybody okay with that? Yep,
I think we're good to go. Okay.
2086 into 221 with the amendments that we just made.
Right.
Okay.
So now let's go back to the tougher part, which is the the Senate Bill 209 with regard to Election Day is Election Day. Did we take, before we go on, we took the ballot images out, right? Yeah, we did. Yeah, okay. Just want a reminder on that. Somebody had a quick question about that. Okay, on to 209. And I don't know if there are some slight differences, so if you'd review that when you have a chance, Jason.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding, the House amendments were to ensure that advanced voting ballots are received not only in the county election office, but at any polling place, at any satellite election office, and at any county-maintained election drop box would be delivered to the by the county election officer to be canvassed. So it's just to encompass all the different points at which those advanced voting ballots could be returned.
I would like to propose that we take the contents of Senate Bill 208, which I took out to turn it into an ethics bill that the Senate originally passed, and put it into this bill, because right now we have no regulation of drop
boxes at all.
Your committee used, I think, 2053, which was the other Dropbox bill, and I gutted 208 to do the ethics bill. So I'd like to do something on drop boxes this year, and so I'd like to propose that we insert the language y'all passed on drop boxes into this bill.
I agree. And any discussion about that?
Just clarification, so did we already pass that?
208, we passed 208, yes.
So, and then you were 2083?
So we had two different Dropbox bills that we heard in the House. One of them was similar to 208, though it allowed for a certain number per county, per population. And then we also heard 2053, which was the one we ultimately passed out of the House, which was to give the Secretary of State authority to regulate drop boxes. We never heard a more restrictive bill, and I know you passed 208 with some amendments, and so I'd like to try to get that in here.
Yeah, and Jason, do you have the original language of 208 with you, or? I think that basically what we did is we removed all drop boxes except for one in the election office that had to be manned by 2 people. Is that correct?
That was the version that passed out of the Senate Committee on Federal and State Affairs. The version that was amended on the floor and passed out of the Senate Committee of the Whole states that no county election office shall use any remote ballot box for the purposes of the return of advance voting ballots.
So it does not ban all drop boxes, but it.
Yes, it says no county election office shall use any remote ballot box for the purposes.
Oh, so we took them all out.
Advance
completely.
voting.
Okay. Oh, there we go. There we go. And all remote boxes shall be closed, locked, and not accessible after 7 p.m. on the date of election. So that's basically for advance voting. Once 7 p.m. reaches, we're good, and I think we're good with that. Any discussion on that from our side?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jason. I'm still confused. So only one ballot box left with this? So is this measure taking all of them away?
It depends on which version of Senate Bill 208 the committee is discussing. If they're discussing the bill that passed the Senate on final action, it removes all remote ballot boxes.
That's what I'm proposing is the version that passed out of the Senate being placed in this bill.
Don't you hear this? We don't want that, do we?
Well, I think part of the problem was, and we've seen in some other elections, that those ballot boxes are the weak link with regard to the potential for fraud, with potential for ballot stuffing or ballot collection. This way, you remove that. And with regard to election integrity, we feel like that's a pretty good step forward. It does not limit the ability to mail in an advance voting ballot, and you can drop it off at any advance voting location, but it just removes the potential for any box to be used, and those boxes, the cost with monitoring with video, even if it's video monitored, you can't necessarily stop that from happening. And it also removes the necessity to have those boxes monitored. In fact, I think I had a picture from one county, I can't remember which it was, where they were dropping in not only advanced voting, but also driver's license registrations and everything else. And so you would have to have somebody sort those out. You could lose ballots that way. And our concern is that this really makes it very, very clear that, you know, you can mail in. You just got to get your advance voting ballot in, mailed in time, and or you could drop it off at an advance voting poll, which to me seems pretty convenient and more secure.
You know, I think what I would say about it is that this is a pretty new phenomena, these drop boxes. I mean, it's been in statute for a long time, but it hasn't been implemented. Really, COVID is when we proliferation of drop boxes. And my goal as the chair of the Elections Committee in the House has always been, what can we do to restore voter confidence? And, you know, I don't agree with every theory that's out there about, you know, what's going on with elections, but they all start kind of from a nugget of vulnerability, and, you know, sometimes they spiral out from there, but they start with that nugget of a real vulnerability, and I think that the drop boxes are a vulnerability. And, you know, I think we address it now before it's an issue. We don't want to be trying to fix this when we do have clear evidence that something's happened, or, you know, somebody's thrown a chain around one of them in a blue or a red precinct and drug it off, you know. And so that's kind of why I think we need to do something with drop boxes this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs. I certainly respect your point of view and your statement. So for me, though, I want everybody to have the right to vote and make it easier. And so I kind of look at this like, you know, we've got tax day is coming up. I know in Sedgwick County where I live, I can go to the post office. There's an extra drop box there that allows me to drop in my taxes by a certain time and date. And again, I'm always concerned about those that work on the south side of town and live on the north side, and they don't get off of work in time to make it to the post office. So that drop box allows them that right to vote. And I don't want to deny someone their right to vote but I certainly respect what you're saying. So I'm against this measure or amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I would say ditto to a lot of what the ranking member from the Senate committee said. We had a lengthy discussion on both these bills in our House committee, and when we were discussing ballot drop boxes, none of the conferees were able to provide examples of any voter fraud dealing with drop boxes in our committee. I was just wondering if you all had a conversation or if there was any evidence of voter fraud using a ballot drop box in the state of Kansas.
I don't believe there is, but again, we're trying to learn from what's happened in other states. And I think, that, you know, you've got to, you can't operate in a bubble or myopic point of view. And we do want to restore there are those folks who really believe there's voter fraud going on. And with regard to restoring their confidence in the process, I think that's what this would address. And I think it's an easy way to address it. I don't think it really restricts the access to voting. Certainly you can vote on election day, you can go to an advance voting, you can do the mail-in voting. So I think it's a common sense way of doing it. And whether or not there is something happening, we don't know. I think the Attorney General even addressed that in our committee, is that you know, he doesn't have evidence. However, it doesn't mean it's not happening. And I think both sides, from a bipartisan standpoint, would want to make sure that there's no nefarious activity on either side, so that we know when we won the election, we won the election. So that's kind of that was our point on that. Certainly not to restrict access to the voting. That's not the intent of this at all, but it just to really restore confidence in everybody in the whole process. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate the discussion. I think as we're looking at, we had a great discussion about the elimination of the 3-day grace period. I think as we're seeing delays in mail, having an additional option for people to drop their ballots off is important. I know the House passed an opportunity for infant safety devices. I hope that if a drop box is safe enough for someone to surrender, or a baby, then we could also drop off our drop advance ballots. Thank you, Mr. Chairs.
okay. So yeah, go ahead, Paul.
No, I do want to throw in the, I mean, the House, you know, we heard the Dropbox issue, you know, I think possibly even twice. And I mean, we actually had, you know, very good evidence. I mean, it was even the example from Sedgwick County, where if you look at mail-in ballots, if that's where the concern is on security, the vast majority of mail-in ballots in Sedgwick County came in through the U.S. Post Office. And that the notion that somebody is going to have a ballot harvesting operation and somehow the drop box is the weak link. I mean, anybody who's going to invest that time and money in a big ballot harvesting, to go to the the blue box on the corner with the U.S. Post Office is equally as good and would be equally as effective. That, I mean, I'm just thinking, I mean, I'm happy to go along with the conference committee report on this, but I just think this is going to raise a lot of red flags to people, particularly I know on the House side of it, and I think we really risk kind of killing everything simply by taking such a hard position on this. Plus also, I mean, anybody who's looked at election procedure is that the real security on mail-in ballots isn't a question of the post office or a drop box. It's a question of the fact of just the signature verification, the fact that you have to apply for a mail-in ballot. I mean, you can't just, Xerox, mail-in ballots and just start mailing them in. Those are the things that actually provide the security in any sort of rational sense. And whether it comes in through a post office box or otherwise is really irrelevant. I mean, I'm just, I know there's concern, and I do appreciate the fact that we are really trying to work on that sort of confidence angle, but I think in a practical sense, I think this is a real negative as far as just garnering support on the House side.
And I appreciate my vice chairman and my ranking minority members' views on this. We've never had an up or down vote in the House on ballot boxes. And so I think there's some value in bringing this to the body and just, if we as a House of the Legislature don't want to ban drop boxes, we will find that out on the floor of the House
quickly.
And then we'll figure out what we are going to do, where people are. And, we've kind of had the spectrum, right? We did pass out 2053 and it was universal. I mean, it was I don't know if there was a single vote against. If it was, there weren't many. It was just, let's give the Secretary of State the ability to regulate. We're also, if we put this in front of them too, and they vote for it, we know that, okay, there's support for doing something with these. If they vote against it, then we know that we got to find somewhere in between 2053 and 208. But I think there's some value in having that up or down vote, and that's why I'm suggesting this.
I tend to agree, and in fact, in written testimony before our committee on this, Keith Esau, who used to be the chair of elections, admitted that, when they instituted that in 2017, he didn't think it was a big deal, but seeing what has transpired ever since, that he feels like they made a mistake. And so I too agree. I think this gives the opportunity to see where we're at in this process and see, up or down vote. If it fails, it fails, and then we know we can come back to the table and negotiate what makes more sense. But to me, I think from the Senate standpoint, I agree. Are you fine with that, Senator Cluse? Yeah. Okay. Are we good with that? Okay. Were you guys agreeing to disagree on that, or I'm not sure what your thoughts on that, or if you're going with that? Three day post. That's the base bill on 208.
209 is
The 3-day grace period. Did you want to ask about that? Okay.
Yes. So the smartest guy, well, two smart guys, three in here, but Mike Hine, can you respond to this? Thank you, Mr. Chairs. So if we are eliminating that 3-day grace period afterwards and saying that all advance ballots must be in the box or in the election office by 7 p.m. that day, are we changing, did we to make that work? Did we change the day that one must request that advance ballot and notifications to go out so that all that time works together?
The Senate Bill 209, as it stands, does not deal with any dates other than the 7 p.m. on Election Day.
Mr. Chairman, so I'm serious. So by law now, and the Secretary of State's office can verify that it has to be a date. So, you have these pamphlets that say, advance ballot starts here, you must request your ballot, and it's back by this date. All that has to kind of work together. And if we're saying now everything's got to be there, then the public needs to know, well, they need to request their advance ballot earlier. So those that might be traveling or in the military, we've got to make all those dates coincide.
Well, the military has exception. They got the UCAVA, and I think they can email in their request. I don't know if, Clay, if you wanted to speak to that a little bit. I think our intent, policy-wise, was to set a clear and defined finish line at 7 p.m. Yeah.
A question, as you're coming up, a question I'd love for you to answer is, when is the earliest that a voter can request their mail-in ballot? Because I think it's like pretty much any time, isn't it?
Mr. Chair, there is a date in statute, but oftentimes requests will come in early and they're just essentially put in a hold box and not processed until that date's reached. But they're mailed out 20 days before the election. And I think you all can understand the implications of no 3-day and no drop boxes is similar, but there's other places a ballot could be taken, like a polling place, but you wouldn't be able to drop it off at night, for instance. Or
Any other questions? Did you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to that point there, so the election captains, they have to collect all of their things from the voting locations. And so is that them too? They've got to have all of the ballots, those that walk into an election office, and so I want to vote on paper. So now, do they need to rush over there by 7 to get it there?
We amended the bill in committee. I think the ranking minority member brought the amendment. But we amended this bill in committee to make it clear that you just had to have it someplace in an official receptacle, whether that's a drop box or at the polling place or in the clerk's office by 7 p.m. So, because we acknowledge that in the polling place, they're going to get it at 7, but it isn't going to make it to the clerk's office till like 9 or 10, depending on how far away they are from the clerk's office.
Right. And this does not affect the adjudication of ballots. This just is the end of the collection of the ballots. But, if there's any provisional ballots, they still go through the process of dealing with that and making sure it's just a clear, it's like, at the Super Bowl, when the clock hits 0, whoever won, and we just stop collecting the ballots at that particular time. So,
sometimes like you're having a conversation, and then afterwards you think what you wish you'd said. Well, when we were debating this bill 209 on the floor, I talked about how, all those things that the chairman just said about, getting the ballots in, getting them counted, and the fact that, with UCAVA, they have to, the mail-in ballots for service members have to go out 45 days before the election, not 20, 45 days before the election, and then they can email or fax it back. What I forgot to say that I wish I had said is, we've gotten a number from the Secretary of State's office of something like 3,500 ballots that came in after Election Day. And it was like 1,500 before they changed the law in 1,700. The number that we've never seen, the number that I'm really concerned about, is the number of ballots that were rejected because they didn't get a postmark. Because we can't make the post office postmark the ballots, and if they come in after the deadline without, after the election day without a postmark, they don't get counted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This issue is really important to me. So 2 quick questions. So if I come to the voting location and I've got my advance ballot in my hand and I didn't vote at the machine, I just want to, so will you still take my advance ballot at the door of an election location at 7 p.m.? And then the other question to that is, well, answer that as I'm...
Clay, if you'd like to talk to that, yes.
Yes, Senator. Every polling place, whether it's an early in person or an election day, has a container where some people can drop off a mail ballot. But again, they're only open generally 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
you, Mr. Chair. So also in law, we have whereas you, if I drop off my advance ballot and the signature needs to be verified within the law, the election commissioner has to try to contact that person and allow you to show your correct signature for your vote to count. Did you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Right ahead and repeat.
So, in law, it says that if I drop off my advance ballot and a signature verification is needed to count my vote, by law, the election commissioner has to try to find me, give me a chance to write my signature better to have my vote counted. So in all that we're doing, Clay, does it consider that? In the time frame.
Consider that true, if I understand the question. Any mail ballot, whether it arrives in the mail, Dropbox, polling place, drop container, if before that envelope is open, you make sure that voter had requested it, the signature matches, everything's good, then it's open to the ballot process.
So as long as you got it in there by 7, then the election commissioner can still call me and say, we need your verification, signature verification, and then your vote
Or
counts.
the ballots, what she's talking about, I think. Yeah.
There's a problem with the signature, the county has to write a letter and make 3 phone call attempts, or in addition, they can do some other email or personal visit.
And this actually, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this actually gives them more time, right? Because the ballots don't keep coming for 3 days after the election. They stop coming on election day, and so they've got those 3 extra days to cure ballots, I would think.
Mr. Chairman, you guys are good.
We've thought it through a little bit, but I think we're good with it. So I'll let the ranking decide what she wants to do on this, and
Yeah, this bill, we took the bill that you passed and we amended it so it looked exactly like the House version where the ballots can, the ballots could go to any place by 7 p.m. They didn't have to be in the clerk's office by 7 p.m.
But I voted against it, so I'm still that, and it seemed, I want the grace period time, I want the ballot boxes, I want it easier for people to vote, and we already know at the end of the day, 4 people overrides 2.
Well, I'd ask,
so nice.
I'd ask the ranking minority members to consider the value of us having a vote on this. Because I'm not certain that this passes in the House. I'm not certain that this passes in the House. There are a lot of rural members that like the drop boxes, that like the 3-day waiting period. So I think there's, I'd ask you to consider the value of doing an up and down vote.
I would tend to agree with you. I'm not sure it's going to fly 100% either, but I think this will clear up a lot where people are at. Then we're just going to have to regroup and go from there.
I think this is part of the process. See where the people are on this. There is a set group of people who are very, 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 very concerned about this, and I think that if we don't at least make this attempt to see, where we land on this situation, we'll never know, and that kind of stakes the parameters of what we have to deal with going forward. So.
And, I also acknowledge that some members might not want to be put on the spot on this topic, but I think this is such a vital concern for some voters that I think that there's value in knowing where we stand as a body. That's my 2 cents. So.
You guys are good? We're just kind of seeing where you're at, whether you want to, if you want to go with this, or.
I'm willing to take a gamble on up or down just to see what people think or do. That's like putting money in a slot machine to see if I would win or not. I already know how my feelings are and the importance of voting. And No, and I needed clarification of, you know, if, Mr. Clay Barker, Bob Barker, come on down. So, still, how will it affect your, I mean, well, not your, but the Secretary of State's office, and you already know that our counties are all different. So how would that 3-day waiting or 3-day grace period, I'll call it, is that the same in all the counties, all 105 counties? I mean, do you wait more days, need more time like Sedgwick County to count all those ballots? I mean, that's my main part of this. The other stuff I could probably go with, but, you know, I had asked in our hearing if the Secretary of State's office was going to do some public service announcements to inform voters that you don't have that 3-day grace period anymore. I mean, I could imagine all the people that will start calling me and saying, oh, I didn't get my ballot there. I didn't get the vote. I mean, I don't know how. And I know, don't say you'll do whatever we say to do. Don't say that.
Well, Senator, first of all, on the public announcement, our office is fee funded, so we don't have money that we could spend on that, but we could make every effort we could to get it out and have the counties publicize it. I mean,
I would
be
imagine.
running TV commercials or something like that. And Senator, from what we can tell, we don't have prime data on this. It looked like about 3,500 ballots came in the 3 days after the election. Don't know how many would have been counted or weren't counted. And it varies by county. It seems like the larger counties have maybe proportionally more of those than the rural counties. We thought at first the rural counties would be slower to deliver, but it seemed like it was more of a Johnson, Sedgwick, Shawnee, Wyandotte, somewhat more. It doesn't really affect the administration of the election. Those counties have the staff that they can handle processing, and as ballots come in, they just put them in the pile and work them.
And I do know in Johnson County, they send out postcards every election, reminding you of your polling place, advanced voting places. They have a good website, and it also, so they could easily post the changes in election law. And I'm sure the media too would help with this as well, because they're going to be reporting on the changes. So I don't think getting the word out is a big deal. People just need to pay attention and understand that we've just changed the parameters of the voting time.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question, since you said that certain counties mail out, information. So I also know in Sedgwick County or Shawnee County, when our current insurance commissioner, Vicki Smith, was the chair of the elections committee, I found out that in Shawnee County, when they mail out the advance ballot, they mail out a stamped envelope for their constituents to mail back. Again, that doesn't happen in Sedgwick County, and that's up to each county in order, if they want to spend their money with sending a stamped envelope to this Representative Woodard to just conveniently mail his ballot back. And so it's just, as we know, it's different for every. So Secretary of State's office or Mr. Chairs, so do we want to mail everybody a stamped envelope in every county?
I don't know if we want to do that. I think that would run into a fiscal note for each county, and again, as Clay said, they're fee funded, so that's a whole different ballgame for them. It would be up to each county.
Every county, it's different.
It's different for each county. I know in Johnson County, they do. We get notification, little postcard notification. So it
Of
would.
course, people in my inner city, they don't get that information. They call me and ask me if I could get them a stamp or come
D-
Same, it's, so do whatever you're gonna do.
Well,
I'm
does,
probably gonna-
okay, does Sedgwick County have a website? I'm assuming they would, election
Mr.
website.
Chairman, they do.
Yeah.
But a lot of my constituents don't have computers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe it's a rite of passage to get kicked off the conference committee after the first one, but, given we've had a lot of conversation in our House Democratic Caucus about some of the process, and just to kind of selfishly buy myself a little bit more time to prep for that conversation, I don't think I'd be able to sign on, so.
Okay, so we got to agree to disagree on this one. Okay, very good. And that'll give us a little bit of time, I think, to see where we're at. Good with you?
Chairman, do you want a conference committee report? I know the agree to disagree, but do you want us to work up a conference committee report on 209 that would include the Senate version of 208?
I think that's what we
That's, yes,
decided to do.
yes.
Let me just alert you that on 209, it does provide or a county-maintained election drop box, so that language will be stricken.
Yeah.
Okay, good enough.
Yes. Then,
That'll give us room for a cleanup bill next year too, Mike, so, you know.
good point. So I think we are done, I believe, correct? I believe. Thank you, we'll have.
We don't have anything else that we think we need to do, unless y'all do.
Okay, no, I think we're good. So we will adjourn, and we'll get the agree to disagree. Do we come back then on that and reconvene?
You don't have to. We'll come and find you when you're on
Okay.
the floor.
All righty. All righty, thank you. Oh, one last question?
So, but can we still have a write-up of the comparisons, what we did and
I
didn't?
think the research department will prepare their write-up for sure.
Thank you.
That way you can see the difference. Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna invite you to my district to help explain it.
Just bring the microphone.
Can I come just to watch that?
Yeah. That'll be it. Thank you, everyone.